The graduation hall was filled with light and music. Rows of young men and women wore shining gowns, their families clapping and cheering with pride. Laughter echoed from the decorated stage as names were called, each graduate walking across, shaking hands, smiling wide. It was a moment meant for joy, for hope, for the promise of futures waiting to be lived. But at the far corner of the hall, away from the busy crowd, sat one figure who belonged yet did not belong. The dragon lady sat alone. Her tall frame drew attention no matter how hard she tried to shrink into the shadow of her seat. Scales shimmered faintly under the fabric of her gown, a hint of silver and red beneath the cloth. But what caught the eyes of anyone who dared to glance her way was her leg, metal forged and jointed, humming with faint blue light. The robotic limb stretched out stiffly, its sharp edges glinting against the polished floor. Children who saw it turned quickly away. Parents whispered to each other. Classmates avoided the empty seats on either side of her, as though invisible walls had been raised there. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the smooth floorboards. She tried to listen to the names, to the music, to the clapping hands, but every cheer sounded like thunder in her chest. The hall felt smaller and smaller with every moment she sat alone. 100 faces smiled at others, yet not a single one turned her way. Her hands curled in her lap. She could feel the weight of their stares even when they tried not to look. She remembered the rumors whispered behind her back in the academy halls. Monster, half-machine, war daughter. She had survived battles none of these young men and women had ever seen. She had lost more than they could imagine. But all they saw was the metallic limb and the dragon blood in her veins. The music swelled again, bright and victorious, but in her ears it felt hollow. She shifted slightly, the robotic joint making a soft clicking sound. The student sitting 2 rows ahead glanced back at the noise, his smile faltering. He turned back quickly as if he had touched fire. The dragon lady breathed deeply, forcing her chest to rise and fall calmly, though inside she wanted nothing more than to stand and leave the hall forever. But she stayed, because even if no one clapped for her, even if no one looked her way, this was still her graduation too. She had earned the right to be here. On the far side of the hall, the great doors opened with a long creak. Late arrivals stepped in, their footsteps echoing faintly against the stone walls. The crowd barely noticed them at first, too busy with applause and chatter. But the dragon lady's sharp ears caught the sound instantly. She lifted her gaze for the first time in many minutes and saw them. A man walked in, his clothes plain and dusted with earth. His boots were heavy, worn by the weight of fields and work. At his side skipped a little girl, no more than 8 years old, clutching his rough hand with excitement. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied with a ribbon that looked handmade. The farmer father and his daughter seemed out of place among the polished crowd, yet they walked forward without hesitation, eyes scanning the seats. The girl tugged at her father's arm, pointing toward the rows where students sat. Her bright eyes shone as if searching for something or someone. The man leaned down, listening to her whispers, then followed her small hand with his gaze. The dragon lady froze. The child's finger was pointing directly at her. She stiffened in her lonely chair, the robotic leg shifting slightly as if bracing for impact. Her heart beat harder than the applause around her. No one ever pointed at her unless it was with fear or mockery. What could this little girl want? Why would she look at the one seat everyone else avoided? The farmer hesitated, his brow furrowing as he glanced at the figure in the corner. The hall's warm light flickered across the dragon lady's metallic limb, across the faint line of scales visible at her wrist. The man clearly saw what she was. The whispers had surely reached him too. Yet his daughter tugged harder, urging him to follow. The dragon lady lowered her eyes quickly, pretending not to notice. Perhaps if she stayed still, they would pass her by, choose another place to sit. She had learned long ago that silence was a shield, that hiding in the shadows was safer than hoping for kindness that never came. But the sound of small footsteps approached, light and quick. The child's shoes tapped against the floor as she pulled her father closer, weaving through rows of seated families. A hush spread among nearby students as they realized where the farmer and his little girl were heading. Curious eyes followed. Quiet murmurs rippled through the crowd. The dragon lady's chest tightened. Every instinct told her to stand and leave before they reached her. She could not bear another scene, another rejection, another moment of someone pulling away once they realized who she was. But her body would not move. She sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap, the hum of her robotic leg echoing faintly beneath the rising tension. The little girl stopped directly before her. She tilted her head back, wide innocent eyes staring up at the dragon lady without fear, without hesitation. For a long second, no words were spoken. The silence spread further, drawing in more and more attention. The dragon lady looked down slowly, meeting the gaze of the child. And for the first time in what felt like years, she saw no disgust there, no fear, no hate, only simple curiosity, simple wonder. Then the girl spoke, her voice clear in the hushed hall. "Can we sit with you?" The words struck harder than any weapon, sharper than any blade. The dragon lady's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected kindness. She had not expected a choice. The farmer behind the child looked uneasy, shifting his weight as if torn between protecting his daughter and respecting her wish. His weathered eyes locked with the dragon lady's for a moment. There was caution there, but also something else, something quiet, something human. All around them, whispers grew louder. Faces leaned in to see. Students muttered, parents frowned. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the dragon lady would do. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her voice, so strong in battle, faltered here in the face of one small question. She had never been asked such a thing. Not once. Not in all the years since she had returned from the war, marked by her blood and her machine. The robotic leg clicked faintly as she shifted. Her hands trembled on her lap. The child was still waiting, her small hand reaching toward the empty seat beside the dragon lady. And for the first time that night, the dragon lady lifted her head high. The crowd leaned closer. Would she push them away? Would she tell them to leave? Or would she break the wall that had kept her apart from the world for so long? The hall was silent now. The music had faded, the applause forgotten. All eyes were on her. And in that silence, the dragon lady's answer would change everything. The silence inside the graduation hall stretched like a rope pulled tight. For one fragile moment, no one moved, no one spoke, as if the world itself had frozen. The dragon lady stared down at the little girl standing before her, hand raised, waiting for an answer. That simple question, "Can we sit with you?" still echoed in her ears, louder than the music, sharper than the whispers around them. The farmer shifted behind his daughter. His boots scuffed against the polished floor, a sound out of place among the shining shoes and neat gowns around him. His broad shoulders were bent with years of work, his hands rough and scarred from soil and tools. He was not a man of ceremony, not a man of polished words or fine clothes. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of hundreds of eyes, his child tugging at his arm, urging him to move closer to the one person no one else dared approach. The dragon lady's metallic leg hummed faintly as she straightened in her chair. The blue light along its seams pulsed like a heartbeat, betraying the storm inside her. She had expected rejection, fear, maybe even insult. But kindness? She did not know how to meet it. Her throat tightened, her chest heavy with an ache she thought long buried. The girl's bright eyes never wavered. Her small hand still hovered above the empty seat, waiting. The dragon lady's claws twitched against her gown. Should she allow them? Or should she spare herself the pain that always followed when hope came too close? The murmurs around them swelled. Students leaned closer to each other, whispering sharply. Why would he go near her? Doesn't he know who she is? Someone should stop them. Teachers frowned, their smiles fading. Families pulled their children closer, as if the dragon lady were a storm about to break. The farmer heard those whispers. His jaw tightened. He glanced at the crowd, then at the dragon lady again. His daughter was fearless, but he was not blind. He knew the weight pressing down on this moment. Still, His hand rested gently on his little girl's shoulder, not pulling her back, not silencing her. He let her stand there, waiting for the answer. The dragon lady inhaled slowly. Her voice, when it came, was low and careful, almost amused. You wish to sit here? The little girl nodded at once, smiling as though it were the simplest thing in the world. Yes, everyone else is sitting with someone. You look lonely. The words struck deeper than she could have imagined. The dragon lady's throat ached as she looked away, blinking hard. No one had ever spoken such words to her without malice. No one had seen her loneliness and called it out with kindness. The farmer stepped forward now, placing a steady hand on his daughter's shoulder. He cleared his throat, his voice rough but steady. If you would allow it, he said carefully, we'll sit with you. If you'd rather we not, we'll move elsewhere. The dragon lady looked up, her sharp golden eyes meeting his. For a long second, their gazes locked. He did not flinch at the sight of her inhuman features, nor did he look away from the faint gleam of scales at her throat or the machine limb at her side. There was no pity in his eyes, no hatred either. Only the quiet weight of a man who had seen much and judged little. She nodded once, slowly. Her clawed hand moved, resting lightly on the back of the empty chair beside her. Her voice, soft yet clear, broke the silence. You may sit. The little girl's face lit with joy. Without waiting another heartbeat, she climbed onto the seat, her small legs swinging. She leaned close to the dragon lady, smiling as if she had just made a new friend. The farmer followed, lowering himself onto the other side with a heavy sigh, his presence solid and grounding. Gasps rippled through the hall. The whispers turned into a wave of disbelief. They actually sat with her. That child shouldn't be near her. What is he thinking? The judgment hung thick in the air, but the farmer ignored it. He sat tall, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's lap, his gaze calm as if daring anyone to challenge his choice. The dragon lady did not speak at first. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, her robotic leg humming faintly with each shift. The little girl looked up at her with wide eyes, studying every detail, the silver scales along her wrist, the faint scars across her cheek, the way her clawed fingers tapped nervously on her gown. You're very pretty, the girl said suddenly. The dragon lady's head snapped toward her, startled. Pretty. It was not a word she had ever associated with herself. She had been called many things, dangerous, cursed, unnatural, but never that. Pretty? She repeated, her voice rough. The girl nodded eagerly. Yes, and your leg is cool. It looks strong, like a knight's armor. For the first time in years, the dragon lady felt something rise within her. A small, fragile laugh. It broke from her lips before she could stop it, quiet yet real. The sound startled her almost as much as it startled the crowd around them. The farmer's mouth curved into the faintest smile at the sound, though he said nothing. She leaned back slightly, studying the child with new eyes. This girl saw not a monster, not a machine, but a person. She saw beauty where others saw fear, strength where others saw ruin. The girl leaned closer, whispering conspiratorially. Do you fly? My papa told me dragons can fly. The dragon lady's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. Not anymore, she said softly, glancing down at her robotic leg. But once I could. The girl's eyes widened with wonder. She pressed her small hands together. That's amazing. The farmer finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Names are called soon. Don't let them forget to call yours. You've earned it same as the rest. The dragon lady looked at him sharply. No one had ever reminded her of such a thing. Most wished she would vanish before her name was ever read aloud. Yet here was this simple man, treating her as though she were just another graduate. Something shifted deep inside her. But before she could answer, movement caught her eye. Across the hall, a man in an official's uniform had entered. His eyes locked directly on her. He moved with purpose, his expression stern, his gaze flickering to the farmer and his child now sitting at her side. He whispered something to another official, who frowned deeply. The dragon lady's claws tightened against the wooden armrest. She knew that look. She had seen it countless times. Warning, suspicion, the cold judgment of those who thought she should not exist in their world. Her chest grew tight again. For a moment she feared they would drag the farmer and his daughter away, humiliate them in front of the entire hall. But the farmer noticed too. He straightened in his seat, his jaw firm, his arm wrapping subtly around his daughter. He would not move, not unless forced. The hall was alive with whispers now. The music had died. The crowd sensed something building, something heavy. The dragon lady turned her head slowly, her golden eyes narrowing at the official watching her. She did not look away. She would not cower this time. And in that tense silence, she realized something she had not felt in years. For the first time since her return, she was not alone. The farmer's daughter leaned against her arm, small and fearless. The farmer sat firm at her side, unmoving before the crowd. Whatever came next, they had chosen to sit with her. And that choice, simple as it seemed, carried more weight than the roar of the entire hall. The hall was still buzzing with whispers, the crowd's unease filling the air like static before a storm. Yet at the center of that storm sat the dragon lady, the farmer, and his little girl, three figures who seemed strangely calm in the rising tension. She sat stiff, her robotic leg humming faintly beneath the polished floorboards, her scales catching the glow of the overhead lights. The farmer sat beside her, solid as the earth itself, while the little girl leaned forward with curious eyes, unbothered by the silence or the stares pressing in from all sides. The dragon lady had grown used to the weight of hatred. She had learned to carry it, heavy as her own armor. But the gentle warmth of the child's presence pressed against her arm like a strange new fire she had long forgotten. It was disarming, almost frightening in its own way. Her instincts screamed to pull back, to harden her walls, to expect betrayal. But when the girl tilted her head and smiled, those walls cracked a little. "Why do they look at you like that?" the girl asked suddenly, her voice louder than the whispers around them. She pointed to the rows of students and families who were pretending not to stare. The dragon lady froze. She had never been asked so directly. Children had once screamed and hidden behind their mothers at the sight of her claws or her metallic limb. Adults had whispered monster or traitor under their breath. But no one had asked why. She looked down at the little girl, golden eyes sharp yet uncertain. Her mouth opened, but the words would not come. How could she explain centuries of blood, war, and prejudice to a child? How could she describe the fear that followed her like a shadow in every room? The farmer's voice broke the silence, steady but gentle. Because people fear what they do not understand. The dragon lady turned her head toward him sharply. His tone was calm, not accusing, not bitter, just plain truth. He looked at her directly, not flinching from the faint glow of her scales or the hard lines of her machine limb. "They don't know you," he continued, "so they make their own stories about you." The little girl frowned, her small fists clenching. "That's silly," she said firmly. "She's nice." The words struck harder than any blow she had taken on the battlefield. Nice. No one had called her that. Not once. Not even her own comrades, who respected her strength but never her heart. The dragon lady's lips parted, a tremor of something unfamiliar rising in her chest. And then, without planning it, without meaning to, a sound escaped her, a laugh. It was soft, broken at first, but it was real. Her golden eyes widened as if she herself could not believe it. Her chest shook once, then again, and suddenly she realized she was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in years. The sound startled even her, as though it had come from another life, a different woman she had once been. The little girl giggled with her, delighted, clapping her hands softly. The farmer's mouth curved into a faint smile, though he said nothing. The crowd's whispers faltered for a moment, confused by the sight of the dragon lady. Once feared, once hated, smiling and laughing like any other graduate among them. The warmth of that moment wrapped around her chest, fragile but bright. For a heartbeat, she felt almost human again. But the feeling did not last. A movement across the hall caught her sharp eyes. The official in the uniform, the one who had entered earlier, now stood at the edge of the stage. His cold gaze swept over the crowd, settling firmly on her. His lips moved as he spoke to another man in hushed tones, but she could read the stiffness in his shoulders, the tightness of his jaw. They were speaking about her. Her claws curled against the armrest. She had seen men like him before, men who wore order like armor, who saw her not as a person but as a threat to be controlled. The farmer followed her gaze, noticing the officials as well. His face darkened, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's small back. The child, oblivious to the tension, tugged at the dragon lady's gown. "Can I ask you something?" the girl whispered, her voice curious. The dragon lady turned back slowly, her heart still pounding with unease. "Yes," she said carefully. The girl leaned close, her eyes sparkling. "How did you get your shiny leg?" The question was innocent, but it pulled the dragon lady's heart in two directions. Pain rose sharp in her chest as memories of fire and steel rushed back. The battlefield, the screams, the day she had lost her limb, and with it, the last piece of her old life. But in the child's voice there was no judgment, no horror, only wonder. She took a long breath, her clawed fingers brushing faintly along the metallic surface of her leg. "I lost it in the war," she said softly. "There was fire and an explosion. I should have died, but I didn't. They gave me this instead." The girl's eyes widened, her mouth forming a small O of awe. "Like a hero," she whispered. "Like in the stories Papa tells me." The dragon lady blinked, stunned. Hero? She had been called many things after the war, none of them good. But this child looked at her as if she were something out of a legend, something to admire. She swallowed hard, her voice unsteady. "Not a hero," she said. "Just someone who survived." The farmer spoke then, his voice low and steady. "Sometimes, surviving is heroic." The dragon lady turned sharply toward him, her golden eyes locking with his. For a long moment, she searched his face for mockery, for pity, for any trace of dishonesty. But she found none. He spoke as though it were the most natural truth in the world. Her chest tightened again. Her robotic leg thrummed beneath the silence, as if echoing her heartbeat. She wanted to look away, to retreat back into the shadows she knew so well, but the farmer's words held her there. The little girl reached forward suddenly, her tiny hand wrapping around the dragon lady's clawed fingers. The contrast was striking, small soft skin against sharp scales and cold steel. Yet the child held on without fear, smiling brightly. "You're not scary," the girl said. "You're my friend now." The dragon lady's breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her. Not in all the years since the war. Her eyes burned with heat, and she turned her face away quickly, unwilling to let the crowd see the shimmer of tears that threatened to fall. But she squeezed the child's hand gently, her claws careful not to harm. And there, for the first time in a long, long while, she allowed herself to smile. A real smile, soft and trembling, but true. The crowd saw it. The officials saw it. Everyone saw the dragon lady, once feared, once shunned, smiling with a farmer's daughter as though she were no different from any other graduate in the hall. The whispers grew louder, sharper now. Some were shocked, others angry. But in that moment she did not care. For the first time she was not sitting alone. Yet deep inside, a shadow stirred. She could feel the officials' eyes on her like knives. She knew the peace of this moment would not last. And as the child laughed beside her, as the farmer sat firm at her side, the dragon lady braced herself. Because she had seen enough of the world to know, whenever something good came her way, something darker always followed. The applause rose and fell with each name called from the stage. Yet in the corner where the dragon lady sat with the farmer and his daughter, the tension only grew heavier. The child's innocent chatter and laughter had softened her heart. The farmer's quiet strength had steadied her, but she could not ignore the stares. Dozens of eyes lingered on her metallic limb, on her scales, on the sight of a human family sitting at her side as though nothing were strange. Every time she lifted her head, the official's gaze was there, sharp as steel, unblinking. They stood near the stage, whispering among themselves, their uniforms neat, their faces stern. She had lived long enough to recognize suspicion, and she could taste it now like iron in her mouth. They weren't simply curious, they were waiting for her to make a wrong move. The little girl swung her legs happily, her ribbon bouncing with each kick. "When they call your name," she whispered excitedly, "I'll clap louder than anyone else." The dragon lady looked down at her, her chest tightening. She wanted to smile, to accept the child's kindness, but her mind drifted back, far away, to a time before this hall, before this ceremony, to the years that had shaped the whispers following her. Her thoughts dragged her back to fire, back to the war. She had once been a soldier, long before she became a student. The battlefield was where her true education began. She remembered the sky burning red, the screams of soldiers from both sides echoing across ruined fields. She had been young then, her scales bright, her wings strong. She had fought not for honor but survival. Humanity and dragonkind alike had thrown their children into that war, desperate to claim ground, desperate to live one more day. It was in that chaos she had lost her leg. A blast had torn through the trenches, ripping away flesh and bone. She remembered the heat, the smell of smoke, the silence that came when pain became too great to process. When she woke, she was no longer whole. A machine had been grafted to her body, cold steel fused with her blood. She had become half flesh, half weapon. The whispers had started then. "Monster, not one of us. She carries the war in her body." Even her own comrades had looked at her differently, as though she were no longer dragon, no longer soldier, no longer friend. She fought beside them, bled beside them, but still the whispers grew. When the war ended, she thought peace might follow. Instead, suspicion replaced open conflict. Her robotic limb and her dragon blood marked her as a reminder of everything people wanted to forget. And now, even here, years later, the whispers had not stopped. "Why is she here?" a voice hissed from a few rows behind. "She should not sit with us. She's dangerous. Look at her claws. She'll bring trouble." The dragon lady's golden eyes lowered. She had learned long ago to bear such words without flinching, but tonight they struck deeper. Because tonight she wasn't alone. The farmer and his daughter sat at her side, and their presence painted a target on them as well. The farmer heard the whispers too. His jaw tightened, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder. His eyes flicked toward the crowd, daring them to say more aloud. He was a man of soil and stone, not a warrior, yet in that moment his silence was sharper than any blade. The child, however, seemed untouched by the storm brewing around them. She tugged lightly at the dragon lady's sleeve. "Why don't they like you?" she asked softly. The dragon lady's throat tightened. The words carried no malice, only curiosity, yet they weighed heavier than the war itself. She could have brushed it aside. She could have lied. But the girl deserved truth. "Because of the past," she said finally, her voice low. The little girl tilted her head. "What past?" The dragon lady hesitated, her claws tapping softly against her metallic leg. She could feel the official's gaze burning into her, waiting for her to slip, to admit something they could use. But when she looked into the child's eyes, innocent and trusting, she could not hide behind silence. "I fought in the war," she said at last. "I fought because I had to, and because of that, people believe I will always be dangerous. They see me as a reminder of blood and fire. They do not see who I am now." The girl's eyes widened. For a long second, she said nothing. Then she leaned closer, whispering fiercely, "That's not fair." The words were so simple, yet they struck with the force of truth. Not fair. That was the heart of it. The dragon lady turned her gaze away, her golden eyes shimmering faintly. She had lived with judgment so long that she had forgotten how unfair it truly was. She had accepted it as her burden, her curse. But this small human child saw the injustice at once, without hesitation. The farmer's voice came next, calm and steady, but carrying weight. "The past doesn't matter to children," he said. "What matters is today." The dragon lady looked at him sharply. His gaze was steady, his hand still resting gently on his daughter's shoulder. He spoke as though the truth were obvious, as though it were foolish to think otherwise. His words settled in her chest, heavy but warm. The little girl reached out suddenly, her small hand wrapping around the dragon lady's claw. The hall gasped softly at the sight. Human skin against scaled flesh, soft innocence against sharp edges. The child smiled brightly, holding on without fear. "You're not the past," she said firmly. "You're here, with us." The dragon lady's heart trembled. For years she had carried herself like a shadow, marked by history she could not erase. And now, in one moment, a child had given her something she had thought forever lost. A place in the present. But the moment shattered when the official moved forward. His boots struck the floor loudly, cutting through the hushed crowd. His uniform gleamed, his eyes cold and unforgiving. He stopped just a few steps away, his voice sharp and commanding. "This is not appropriate," he said, his words echoing across the hall. "You do not belong here." Gasps rippled through the audience. All eyes turned toward the dragon lady, the farmer, and his daughter. The whispers turned to sharp murmurs, uncertainty spreading like wildfire. The dragon lady's claws clenched. Her robotic limb hummed dangerously, the blue light along its edges brightening. She lifted her head slowly, meeting the official's gaze with fire in her golden eyes. For years she had lowered her gaze. For years she had accepted exile and silence. But tonight, with a child's hand in hers and a farmer at her side, she found a strength she thought long dead. Her voice, when it came, was steady and sharp. "I have as much right to sit here as anyone else." The hall fell silent. The official's jaw tightened. His hand twitched toward the baton at his side, but he did not draw it. The farmer spoke then, his voice low but filled with iron. "My daughter chose to sit here, with her. If that is a crime, then accuse us both." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some frowned, others looked away. But no one dared speak louder. The official's gaze lingered, cold and unyielding. Then he stepped back slowly, his lips tight, his warning unspoken but clear. "This is not over." The dragon lady's heart pounded, but she did not lower her head. She kept her golden eyes fixed forward, her robotic leg humming steadily, her claw still wrapped carefully around the little girl's hand. And for the first time she felt it. Not just survival, not just endurance, but defiance. The whispers of the past still followed her, but tonight, for the first time, she was no longer walking through them alone. The official stepped back into the shadows, but the warning in his eyes did not fade. The dragon lady sat still, her metallic leg humming quietly, the child's hand still wrapped around her claw. The farmer kept his gaze steady, his jaw firm, but even he felt the tension that wrapped the hall like a coiled serpent. The ceremony continued. Names echoed. Applause rose and fell, but the air had shifted. The crowd whispered behind their hands, glancing often toward the corner where the strange trio sat. Some eyes were filled with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with quiet admiration, but all of them lingered. The dragon lady lifted her chin. She would not bend under their stares. Yet deep inside, her heart was uneasy. She had faced armies, fire, and loss, but the silence of suspicion was heavier than any battlefield. Then something happened. It was small at first, so small only she noticed. A vibration against the floor, so faint it could have been a trick of her machine limb. She frowned, tilting her head slightly, listening. Another tremor followed, faint but steady, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the stone. Her golden eyes narrowed. The farmer noticed her shift. "What is it?" he asked softly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting her heightened senses stretch outward. Her scales tingled. Her mechanical limb hummed as if resonating with something deep below. "Something is moving," she whispered. Before he could question her, the lights flickered. The great chandeliers above them swayed gently, glass rattling. A murmur swept the crowd. The announcer paused mid-sentence, looking around in confusion. Then the tremors grew stronger. The floor quivered. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The chandeliers swayed harder. The little girl gasped, clutching tighter to the dragon lady's arm. "What's happening?" she whispered, fear rising in her small voice. The farmer stood, placing himself between his daughter and the shifting shadows, his eyes sharp. "Earthquake," he muttered, but he already knew it wasn't. The dragon lady shook her head slowly. "No, this is not the earth." Her words had barely left her lips when the first crack split through the stone floor near the stage. The sound was sharp, tearing through the silence. Gasps erupted as people stumbled back, chairs screeching against stone. The official shouted, "Remain calm! Stay in your seats!" But his voice cracked with unease. The dragon lady rose to her feet, her metallic leg locking into place with a hiss. Her golden eyes blazed, fixed on the widening fissure. She had felt tremors like this before back in the war. They were not natural. The floor split open, and from the darkness below came a sound that froze every heart in the hall. A low, guttural screech, like metal grinding against bone, filled with hunger. The crowd screamed. From the fissure, black shapes surged upward. Long limbs with hooked claws, eyes glowing faint red in the darkness. The creatures burst into the hall, shrieking, their bodies twisted with unnatural design. They were not animals, not soldiers, they were something in between, a forgotten weapon. The dragon lady recognized them instantly. Her chest tightened as old memories surged back. The Reapers, they had been used during the war, unleashed by desperate factions, created to kill without mercy. She had fought them once before, and many good soldiers had not survived. No one thought they still existed, and yet here they were, crawling out of the shadows, hungry once more. Chaos exploded. Students screamed and ran. Parents pulled their children toward the exits. The chandeliers crashed down as the creatures climbed higher, knocking stone and steel aside with savage strength. The official tried to shout commands, but the Reapers struck faster. One leapt toward him, claws raised. He barely managed to dodge, his baton useless against its armored hide. He fell back, fear breaking through his authority. The dragon lady didn't move at first. Her eyes burned as she watched the nightmare unfold. Then she felt the little girl's grip trembling against her claw. The child's wide eyes were fixed on the monsters, her small body shaking. That was enough. The dragon lady stepped forward, her metallic limbs striking the floor with a heavy thud. The sound echoed, drawing the nearest Reaper's attention. Its glowing eyes locked on her, its jaws opening with a hiss. The farmer pulled his daughter behind him, his voice sharp with urgency. "Stay back!" But the dragon lady raised her arm to stop him. "No," she said, her voice low but filled with fire. "They came for me." The Reaper lunged. His claws slashed down, fast and deadly. The crowd screamed again. The dragon lady moved with lightning reflexes. Her metallic leg hissed and locked, bracing her body. She raised her clawed arm, catching the beast's strike. Metal screeched against metal as her robotic limb held its claws in place. Sparks flew. She snarled, her wings flaring slightly behind her, and with a sudden surge of strength she shoved the monster backward. It stumbled, crashing against the stone wall with a hiss. Gasps echoed through the hall. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, not with suspicion now, but with shock. The farmer's voice broke the silence. "You know these things?" Her golden eyes burned as she stepped forward, her voice steady. "I know them. I fought them once before, and I will fight them again." Another Reaper leapt forward, then another. She met them head-on, her claws slashing, her metallic leg kicking with thunderous force. The sound of impact echoed like drumbeats of war. The child watched with wide eyes, clutching her father's arm. She's protecting us," she whispered. The farmer nodded, his gaze fixed on the dragon lady's fierce form. For years the world had whispered monster at her. But in this moment, there was no mistaking what she was. Protector, warrior, survivor. The hall was a storm of chaos, but at its center stood the dragon lady, her metallic leg glowing faintly, her claws dripping with sparks, her golden eyes blazing like fire. And though the whispers of the past had never faded, tonight a new truth was being carved before every watching eye. The unseen enemy had come, and she was the one standing against it. The graduation hall was no longer a place of pride and celebration. It had become a battlefield. The chandeliers lay shattered across the stone floor, smoke rose from broken walls, and the air was filled with the hiss and screeches of the reapers as they swarmed in from the fissures. People fled in terror, their cries echoing, but many were trapped behind the beasts that now prowled the exits. At the center of it all stood the Dragon Lady, her metallic leg glowing faint blue, her golden eyes blazing. Her claws slashed and her robotic limbs struck like thunder, throwing the reapers back with each furious blow. She moved with deadly precision, her training carved deep into her bones from years of war. But no matter how many she struck down, more climbed from the cracks. Their numbers grew, and their screeches filled the hall like a curse from the past. The farmer shielded his daughter behind an overturned table, his eyes never leaving the fight. The child's small hands trembled as she clutched his sleeve. "She can't do it alone," the girl whispered, her voice shaking. The farmer's throat tightened. He wanted to run, to carry his daughter away from this nightmare, but he knew there was nowhere safe. Not unless the Dragon Lady stood her ground. The Dragon Lady kicked another reaper hard against the wall, the impact cracking stone. But she staggered slightly, her robotic leg sparking at the joint. The years of wear, the long strain of battle were beginning to show. She knew it, and the reapers sensed it too. The official, who had stood against her minutes ago, stumbled forward, fear in his eyes. "You creature," he shouted desperately. "If you know how to stop them, then do it. You brought them here, didn't you?" Her golden eyes snapped toward him, rage burning. "They were buried with the war. I did not bring them, but I am the only one who knows how to kill them." The official faltered, his accusation silenced by the fury in her voice. A reaper lunged toward him then, claws outstretched. He froze in terror. Before the beast could strike, the Dragon Lady slammed her metallic leg forward, kicking the monster away. She saved him without hesitation, though her gaze never softened. "Do not waste my time," she growled. The farmer watched with awe. The whispers that had haunted her for years were being shattered before his eyes. Not by speeches, not by promises, but by action. Still, even he could see her strength fading as more reapers poured in. The child tugged at his arm, her eyes wide and wet. "She's going to die if she fights alone," she said. The farmer's heart pounded. He was no warrior. He had never carried more than tools for the soil. But looking at the Dragon Lady, at the fire in her eyes, he knew she could not hold forever. He turned, searching the broken hall, and saw the fallen baton of the official lying near the rubble. He grabbed it, gripping it tightly. The weight was awkward, but his resolve was firm. He stepped forward. The Dragon Lady's eyes flicked toward him, surprised, as he placed himself at her side. "You can't fight them," she said quickly. "I can stand with you," he answered firmly. The little girl, trembling but unbroken, peeked from behind the table. Her small voice rang out clear in the chaos. "You're not alone anymore." The words struck deeper than any blade. For years she had fought as a shadow, burdened by the past. But now, in the middle of this nightmare, she felt it, the truth. She wasn't alone. The reapers screeched, circling. Their glowing eyes narrowed, sensing the defiance burning stronger than fear. The Dragon Lady clenched her fists. The choice before her was sharp and final. She could retreat, let the humans scatter and hope some survived. Or she could do what she had always done. Stand, fight, and carry the weight of blood. But this time she would not do it for war. She would do it for them, for the farmer, for the child, for every innocent soul trapped in this hall. She spread her wings wide, her metallic leg locking into place with a hiss of power. Her golden eyes blazed brighter than ever as she roared, a sound that shook the walls and silenced every scream. The reapers hesitated. Then she charged. The farmer followed, striking at any beast that came close, clumsy but unyielding. The The child's cries became cheers, her small voice cutting through the chaos. "You can do it! You can do it!" The hall became a storm. Claws clashed with metal, wings struck with fury, and fire burned in every motion. The dragon lady tore through the reapers with ferocity unmatched, each strike of her robotic limb shattering bone and steel. She fought like a legend, every blow echoing with the choice she had made, to be more than her past, to be protector, to be hope. And slowly, the tide turned. The reapers, creatures bred only for destruction, began to falter. Their screeches grew shrill as they realized they could not break her. One by one they fell, their bodies broken against the stone. The survivors hissed and retreated, vanishing back into the fissure with guttural cries. The hall fell silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing and the crackle of broken lights. The dragon lady stood in the center, her body scarred, her metallic limbs sparking faintly, her scales marked with blood. But she stood tall, unbroken. The farmer lowered the baton, his chest heaving. He looked at her with awe, with respect that needed no words. His daughter rushed forward, throwing her arms around the dragon lady's leg, ignoring the sparks and scars. "You did it," the little girl whispered, her voice full of wonder. "You saved us." The dragon lady looked down at her, and for the first time in years, she felt tears burn her eyes. She bent slowly, placing her clawed hand gently on the child's shoulder. "No," she whispered softly. "We did." The official staggered forward, his face pale. He opened his mouth to speak, to issue another accusation, but no words came. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. The whispers of the past had no weight now. The crowd that had once watched her with suspicion now looked at her in silence, their fear replaced by something new: respect. The dragon lady stood tall, her golden eyes calm but fierce. The fissure sealed behind the last retreating reaper, the stones cracking shut as though the nightmare had never been. But everyone knew the truth. Something had returned from the war. And when it did, it was she, not officials, not guards, not leaders, who stood against it. Her story had changed. No longer the monster, no longer the exile, now the protector. And as the farmer placed his hand on her shoulder, and the little girl smiled up at her with innocent trust, the dragon lady felt something she had thought she would never feel again: belonging.